The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the bustling city street. Cars zipped past, their horns blaring impatiently, while pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, lost in their own worlds. Among them was Jake, a 17-year-old high school student, his backpack slung over one shoulder as he made his way home after a long day of classes. He wasn't in a rush, just another regular afternoon, another predictable walk back home. But what happened next would change everything. As he waited at a busy intersection, Jake noticed an elderly man standing a few feet away. The man gripped his wooden cane tightly, his frail frame barely steady, as he peered anxiously at the road. Cars whizzed by relentlessly, making it nearly impossible for him to cross. His hesitation was clear. He needed help, but no one seemed to notice. People walked past, too caught up in their own schedules to spare a moment. Something about the old man's expression struck Jake. He wasn't just waiting, he was stranded. His eyes, a mixture of confusion and worry, darted between the cars and the flashing pedestrian light. Jake hesitated for only a second before stepping forward. "Sir, do you need help crossing?" he asked, his voice warm but respectful. The old man's eyes softened with relief. "Oh, that would be very kind of you, son," he said, his voice slightly shaky. Jake gently took the man's arm and led him across the street, walking at a careful pace to match his steps. The cars slowed as they moved, and the impatient honks became background noise. With each step, Jake could feel the tension in the old man's body easing, as if the simple act of having someone beside him made all the difference. As they reached the other side, the man let out a small, tired breath. "Thank you, young man. People don't stop for old folks like me anymore." Jake smiled. "Anytime, sir. Have a great day." The man nodded gratefully before slowly making his way down the sidewalk. To Jake, it had been nothing more than a small act of kindness, something any decent person would have done. He didn't think much of it as he continued on his way, heading home without realizing that this seemingly simple moment was just the beginning of something far greater. Later that evening, Jake sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone while his mom prepared dinner. The scent of home-cooked food filled the small apartment, wrapping the space in warmth. Life was normal, predictable. He had no idea that somewhere across the city, a conversation was happening, one that had everything to do with him. The elderly man he had helped had returned home, but he hadn't gone unnoticed. Someone had been waiting for him, a woman, elegantly dressed, with an air of quiet authority. She had watched as her father stepped inside, his usual tired expression replaced with something different, something lighter. "You're late, Dad," she said, setting down her tablet. The old man chuckled as he eased into his chair. "I had a little adventure." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh." He recounted the story, the overwhelming traffic, his hesitation at the curb, and then the boy, the teenager who had stopped, who had cared, who had walked beside him with patience and kindness. His daughter listened intently, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly as she absorbed every word. "What was his name?" she asked. The old man frowned slightly. "I didn't ask. He just helped me and went on his way." She leaned back, thinking. In her world, one of business meetings, high-profile events, and tight schedules, people didn't often do things without expecting something in return. A stranger, a teenager no less, showing kindness with no ulterior motive. It was rare, and in her experience, rare things were worth paying attention to. The next day, Jake was back to his routine, unaware that his small moment of kindness had left an impression on someone who had the power to change his life. As he walked out of school, tossing his backpack over his shoulder, he noticed something unusual. A sleek black car parked near the entrance. He wouldn't have thought much of it if not for the woman stepping out. She was well-dressed, poised, and carried an aura of importance, and she was looking directly at him. Jake slowed his steps, confused. Who was she? Why was she watching him? He had no idea that his ordinary life was about to take an extraordinary turn. Jake's footsteps slowed as he watched the woman step toward him. Something about her presence was intimidating, like she belonged in a world completely different from his. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement as she approached. Her eyes locked onto him with quiet determination. "Jake?" she asked, her voice calm, yet authoritative. His heart skipped a beat. How did she know his name? He had never seen her before in his life. Yeah?" he replied hesitantly. The woman gave a small smile, though there was a certain sharpness in her gaze. "My name is Evelyn Carter. My father told me about you." Jake's mind raced. Her father. Then it clicked. The old man. From yesterday. The one he had helped cross the street. This was his daughter. Evelyn studied his reaction for a moment, then continued. "He spoke very highly of you. He said you helped him when no one else did." Jake felt a little awkward. Under her scrutiny. It was nothing really. He needed help, so I helped. Evelyn's expression didn't change. Most people wouldn't have stopped. Jake shrugged. Maybe they were just busy. A brief pause followed. Then, to his surprise, Evelyn reached into her handbag and pulled out a small white envelope. She held it out to him. "My father wanted me to thank you," she said. "This is a small token of appreciation." Jake looked at the envelope suspiciously. He had a feeling he already knew what was inside. Carefully, he took it and peeked in. His eyes widened when he saw several crisp bills, stacked neatly inside. It was more money than he had ever held in his hands at once. His instinct was to hand it back. I can't take this." Evelyn didn't look surprised by his reaction. "Why not?" "Because I didn't do it for money," Jake said honestly. "I just wanted to help him." She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Most people would have grabbed the envelope without hesitation. But Jake? He looked almost uncomfortable. "You're a good kid," she said, slipping the envelope back into her purse. "That's rare." Jake shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't sure what to say. Evelyn checked her watch, as if deciding something. Then with a measured tone, she said, "I'd like to offer you something else." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "My father and I run several businesses," she explained. "We're always looking for hard-working, honest people. I can arrange a job for you, something that could help your future." Jake hesitated. A job? He had never thought about working for someone like her before. His family wasn't rich. His mom worked long hours just to keep things afloat. The idea of making real money, something that could actually help them, was tempting. But at the same time, it felt strange. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never worked a real job before." Evelyn nodded, as if she expected that answer. "Think about it," she said, handing him a sleek business card. "Call me if you're interested." With that, she turned and walked back to the black car. Leaving Jake standing there, with his mind spinning, he looked down at the card in his hand. The name, Evelyn Carter, was embossed in gold lettering, along with a number. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. That night, he sat on his bed, staring at the card. His mom was in the next room, exhausted from work. Their bills were piling up. A job like this, it could help, but something about Evelyn's offer made him uneasy. It felt too easy, too convenient. The next morning, he shoved the card into his pocket and decided to forget about it. But fate had other plans. At school, his best friend, Marco, nudged him at lunch. "Dude, you've been quiet all day. What's up?" Jake hesitated before pulling out the card. "Some rich lady offered me a job." Marco's eyes widened. "Wait, what? Who?" Jake sighed and told him the whole story. Helping the old man, meeting Evelyn, the money, the job offer. When he finished, Marco let out a low whistle. "Bro, that sounds shady." Jake frowned. "How?" "I don't know, man. Rich people don't just offer random kids jobs." There's gotta be a catch. Jake had been thinking the same thing. But then again, wasn't this a chance to change his life? Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello?" A deep voice came through the line. "Jake, it's Mr. Carter, the old man." Jake sat up straighter. "Oh, hi, sir. I heard my daughter spoke to you," Mr. Carter said. "I wanted to call personally. That offer, it's real, and it's yours if you want it." Jake hesitated. "Why me?" There was a pause. Then, in a quiet, serious tone, the old man said, "Because in a world full of people who ignore, you chose to care. That's the kind of person I trust." Jake felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about money. It was about something bigger. But what exactly had he stepped into? As he sat there, phone in hand, he knew one thing for sure. His life was about to change forever. Jake sat frozen, the old man's words lingering in his mind. Because in a world full of people who ignore, you chose to care. It was such a simple thing, yet it carried so much weight. He had never thought of himself as special, just someone trying to do the right thing when he could. But now, for the first time, it felt like that small choice had led him somewhere unexpected. After a long pause, he finally said, I'll think about it." Mr. Carter chuckled. "That's all I ask. But don't take too long. Some opportunities don't wait forever." The call ended, and Jake sat there staring at his phone. A job with people like them. Was it really something he could step into? He had grown up in a completely different world from theirs. He barely had enough money for new shoes, while they probably had drivers waiting for them at all times. But if they were offering something real, something that could actually change his life, maybe he had to at least try. The next day, he made his decision. He dialed the number on the business card, his heart pounding as it rang. Evelyn answered. "I'm in," he said. There was a pause, then a satisfied hum from the other end. "Good choice. Be ready tomorrow. I'll send someone to pick you up." The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside Jake's small apartment building. His mum had already left for work, so no one was there to see him step inside. The driver barely said a word, and the ride was silent, except for the hum of the engine. When they arrived, Jake was led into a massive office building. Marble floors, glass walls, and people in expensive suits moving with purpose. He felt completely out of place. Evelyn met him in the lobby, as composed as ever. "Welcome to our world," she said, with a slight smirk. She took him upstairs, guiding him through hallways lined with offices and conference rooms. Finally, they stepped into a quiet room where Mr. Carter sat behind a large wooden desk. He looked up, smiling warmly. "Glad you decided to come, Jake." Jake nodded, still unsure of what exactly he had signed up for. "So, what do you want me to do?" Mr. Carter gestured to a chair, motioning for him to sit. "Before we get to that, tell me something. What do you want out of life?" The question caught Jake off guard. No one had ever asked him that before. Not in a way that actually made him think. I don't know," he admitted. "I just want to help my mom. Make life easier for her." Mr. Carter nodded approvingly. Good answer. You see, Jake, my daughter and I have built something big. But no matter how much money or success we have, people like you, people who care, are what make a real difference. We need more of that in our world. Jake listened intently as Mr. Carter continued. I don't just want to give you a job. I want to invest in you, teach you things they don't teach in school, help you build a future where you can make a real impact. Jake swallowed hard. This was bigger than he expected. Why me, though? Mr. Carter smiled. Because you remind me of myself when I was your age. Something about those words struck Jake deep. He had always thought people like the Carters were born into success, but maybe that wasn't true. Maybe they had worked their way up, just like he wanted to. From that day on, Jake stepped into a world he had never imagined. He started with small tasks, learning how businesses ran, how decisions were made. At first, it was overwhelming, but he pushed through. The more he learned, the more he realized he had a talent for this. He wasn't just some kid trying to get by. He had potential. Over time, his relationship with the Carters grew. Evelyn, though strict, became a mentor, pushing him to think bigger. And Mr. Carter, he became something Jake never expected. A guiding figure, almost like the father he had never really had. Months passed, then years. Jake worked hard, learning everything he could. And before he even realized it, he wasn't just an outsider in this world anymore. He was a part of it. One day, he found himself sitting across from Mr. Carter once again. Only this time, he wasn't the nervous kid who had walked into this office years ago. He had grown. Mr. Carter looked at him with pride. You've come a long way, Jake. Jake smiled. I had a good teacher. The old man chuckled. That you did. And now it's your turn to help others. Jake took a deep breath, realizing just how far he had come. From a simple act of kindness to a life-changing journey, one choice had led to all of this. And now he had the power to make a difference in someone else's life. Just like Mr. Carter had done for him as he walked out of the office that day, he knew one thing, for certain, his future was his to shape. And it all started with a single moment of kindness.